All right, so hello everybody. Today's April 6th. It's a Tuesday. We're still in 2020, of course. So if you're watching this in the future, where I'm at right now, we're still in the midst of the whole pandemic. If you're watching this 20 years in the future, maybe you'll be learning about this in history class. So maybe you're using this video as like a study guide for your test on how the coronavirus led to the biggest economic collapse we've ever seen, which, well, it will definitely not be the longest economic collapse we've ever seen. I don't think it will be like the Great Depression, but it's going to be the sharpest economic collapse that we've ever seen, and that will no doubt be historical. But I do want to say something on that, though, because it's a thing that I've noticed, and it's the fact that history, we seem to prepare for things based on what just happened in the recent past. So pretty much what I mean by that is that we're always going to be behind the curve with what happens next. It's just kind of the way we approach problem solving and we approach our preparation. So for example, after the 2008 crisis, we pretty much did everything in our power to make sure that all of the large banks would not collapse again. So we passed all these regulations, all of these rules to ensure that the system, which collapsed in 2008, would not collapse again. But in doing so, we forgot about a whole bunch of other problems. We let a whole lot of other things develop in its place because we were just so focused on making sure that this one particular crisis does not repeat. But the fact is, crises never repeat for the same reason, pretty much. I mean, it's kind of rare for the exact same thing to happen twice. What pretty much always happens is the next crisis is going to be something completely new. The only certainty is that something is going to happen, but you're never certain about what exactly is going to happen. So, for example, nobody expected for this virus to be a problem, and as a result, we were caught off guard with it. But I guarantee you what's going to happen is after this virus, after it kind of calms down and, the economy reopens, it's going to be a whole bunch of measures by the government to make sure that something of this magnitude will not happen again. So they're going to exert all of this attention, all of this focus on, I guess, pandemic control, or they're going to try to improve the mechanisms of response so the next time a virus breaks out, we can immediately shut it down before it becomes a much larger scale issue as it has become today. But the thing is, in doing so, we'll also be completely, I guess, over or underlooking, some other big problems that are eventually going to cause the next crisis. So kind of my point is, in preparing, of course you should always learn from your past mistakes, but preparing for future events, you can't just solely rely on, what caused problems in the past, because it's always going to be something new. It's just kind of the way nature functions. It creates these random outlier events that you just can't ever anticipate. You just know that is going to happen. And if you analyze our world or our structure, our system, you'll notice there's a lot of particular points of stress, and any one of those particular points of stress can eventually become something much worse, but you're just not sure what it's going to be. So in our case this time, the point of stress that was exploited was our inability to handle pandemics. So it was something that was always there. We always we always were in a position that we would be caught off guard if a pandemic was to break out. It's kind of why, we've heard predictions, a few years back from many people who were saying if a pandemic happens, it's going to be bad because we're not ready for it. So that point of stress always existed, but we were never able to realize it because all we were focused on was what points of stress were exploited in the past. But it's not about that. It's about what's really important is what could potentially be what could potentially become a source of harm in the future. But the thing is, whenever you try to say, I'm looking at this particular area and it seems like there's something that's bad that's potentially coming out of this area, but people are going to say that you're just creating conspiracy theories. So if you're saying something like, in this particular market, I see the prices are overvalued, and I think that it's going to be some sort of correction. People are going to say that you're just trying to create fear, you're just trying to get views. So people kind of shut down that type of talk. But really, that's the type of talk we need to be having. We need to be thinking about what could potentially cause the next crisis, and we need to prepare for that. That's kind of how. But our thinking now is we're always going to be behind the curve, and as a result, things like this are going to continue to happen. And it's all a result of how we think and how we approach the analysis of our world. So yeah, it's just something I wanted to say. And like it's not that you should just ignore what happened in the past. Of course, you should use what happened in the past as a guide, but if you look at what happened in the past, you will also know that you'll be able to figure out the same mistake that people have been making, which is people overlook things that are many times very obvious, but people kind of blind themselves to it because they think the only thing that could potentially happen in the future is something that we've already seen. But it's just not the case. The next big crisis that's going to upend the economy is going to come from a source that we've never really anticipated. No two crises are the same, and we need to fully encompass that idea in our thinking. So anyway, that's just the first thing I want to talk about in today's episode. But really, the real first topic I want to talk about is the small business loans, the attempt by the government to make sure that a lot of these small businesses aren't going to completely fail as a result of this shutdown. And I want to talk about, because it's a pretty problematic program that they have going on. And I think that, if and when this program fails, it's going to create much greater collateral damage on the economy that's going to last a much longer amount of time. So if you don't already know, the government recently passed like a $2 trillion stimulus bill that's supposed to support the economy. Of course, that's what the stimulus bill does. And they pretty much set out aside like $250 billion that's supposed to be lent to small businesses. Now, when they say lent, it's really a grant, because they're not, as long as they meet a certain criteria, they don't have to pay back the loan. The government will pretty much forgive the loan. Okay, so it's really a handout, which I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because a lot of these small businesses, you can't really expect them to prepare. I expect large companies to prepare for these type of events. Small businesses, they get a pass because they don't have they don't have nearly as many resources and connections to really build a strong enough structure that can withstand the events to the magnitude that are constantly being experienced in our world. So I do think that small businesses should receive support. So they can so they can pretty much just cover the payroll and all the basic expenses that are needed in order to survive as a business. So I pretty much agree with the purpose of this program, to set money aside that can be lended to these small businesses, but the way that they're going about doing it and the capacity we have to actually do it is clearly not very strong. So the stuff I'm seeing is, from a lot of these big lenders, it's the same problem. For one thing, it's not enough money. Okay, they have like $250 billion, but the amount of money that's actually required is probably above $1 trillion. But I guess you could say that could be solved if they run out of money. The government will they can pretty much always hand the lenders more money and then allow them to to cover any shortfalls. But the thing is, you have a big dilemma. So pretty much, on one hand, you want to secure yourself against fraud. You want to make sure that no one's trying to scam the system and receive money that they pretty much should not be receiving. So if you don't meet the requirements in order to receive a loan, you're not supposed to get a loan. And if a lender, if they still give that loan to someone who does not meet the requirements, then the lender could be eventually punished, and it'll cause a lot of problems for the lender. So if you're one of the institutions that are supposed to be lending out this money, you face this problem, because on one hand, you need to be fast. You need to process these loans as fast as possible. But on the other hand, you need to be very cautious about who you're actually lending to, because if you're lending to the wrong person, that falls back on you. So that's one big problem. So a lot of people aren't really too enthusiastic to participate in this program that's supposed to save all these small businesses, because the incentives really aren't there. If you're asking someone to accomplish such a task of such large weight and they're not getting much return out of it, the interest that they're supposed to get out of these loans are not very high. So the compensation for the risk simply does not add up in a way that would entice a lot of lenders to be overly enthusiastic about cooperating. And that's one problem. Of course, the what's eventually going to happen is, the eventual outcome is going to be, I think that the entire program is just not going to be fast enough, because at the end of the day, these they're not going to just be able to just process all of this volume at the speed that is needed, because a lot of these small businesses, they're already a few days away from running out of cash, and they need a loan now. So if for example they run out of money, and then Congress needs to Congress needs to provide more money that can be lended out, it's not going to be fast enough. And then what's going to happen is a lot of small businesses are going to go under, and then that of course is going to have a long-lasting economic impact, because the original expectation was that if we could just keep these small businesses operating, the minute the virus is done, there's going to be an economic boom, because all these companies are going to have the resources needed to immediately restart the production at the same level that they were at prior to the virus. But if they fail, of course, or if they're in a deep financial hole because they had no access to any sort of funding, then that's not going to be able to take place. And then a lot of people are going to be unemployed for a much longer amount of time. So I think that's eventually what's going to happen. And it's just kind of an efficiency problem. It's a problem where on such short notice, you have to get all this money out so fast to so many people, and it's just unrealistic to really accomplish. So it's just something that you can't really avoid, and I'm not sure many people will realize that. I think that a long economic downturn is unavoidable. There's going to be a lot of businesses that are simply just not going to last. There's going to be a lot of people who have lost jobs, and it's going to be a long time until they're able to find new jobs. So it's a bad situation, but that is a situation. I'm pretty much certain that this small business loan program, it's not going to work. It's already failing in some sense. It's already some banks who aren't sure how to even really execute this process, and then is other banks who are already seeing extremely high levels of demand that they're not able to really handle, and it's very inefficient. But it's supposed to be right now it's our primary solution to helping the economy, and that's kind of a worrisome sign. All right, so anyway, kind of running back to my prior point where I was talking about how, random events can just occur, and it's always something new, right? It's just kind of the way the world and nature kind of just function. They create these random outlier events that nobody expects, and they cause a lot of problems. But I also want to talk about that even when it's not, a random, thing caused by nature, where like, a storm happens, even if many times it could just be humans. Even when humans are in control, even when humans are the ones making the choices, humans are subject to mistake. Humans can make mistakes. They make mistakes all the time, or sometimes they're not making mistakes. Sometimes humans just have bad intentions, and we can't always assume that humans are always going to make the right choices for the well-being of mankind. And I guess for example, the oil price war in the Middle East, what you're having is, a country like Russia is trying to get a larger share of the oil market, and they're doing this by increasing production, and then the price of oil is falling, and then as a result, all these American oil energy producers, they kind of they pretty much fail, and then a country like Russia can get a bigger market share. So something like that was a decision made by a person. It was not just some natural random event, but it was nothing that people expected, because I guess people never assume that something like someone would just all of a sudden randomly say, all right, I'm just gonna increase oil production to make the prices as low as possible to drive all these American energy producers out of business. Nobody expects other people to think like that or act like that, but they do, and they do it again and again and again. But we always act surprised whenever it happens. And it's just how we account for our world and how we account for risk in our world. And it's very important, because we never really think about that. Of course, I was talking about earlier about just natural random events that can happen, things that you completely do not expect. Many times it's our world leaders who make a bad decision. And it doesn't matter how smart they are. It doesn't matter how much of an expert they're supposed to be. People can make bad decisions, and you can be launched into a crisis because of a bad decision. So really what's important is you're not going to be able to eliminate this risk. It's an intrinsic risk, and it's something that will perpetually exist. But what you can do is you can try to reinforce our systems, so when these risks do occur, when these risks become crises and they actually happen, even when they're unexpected, you'll at least be in a position to where you can absorb it. And we've not done that. A large reason why the economy reacts so bad to the coronavirus, because here's the thing, it's a lot of companies that are completely fine. Of course their earnings are going to be hit, but once the virus is over, they're going to be fine. They have enough cash. They're going to be able to survive the crisis because they were prepared. But the companies that are having so much trouble were companies that were already in bad positions prior to the crisis, because they never thought that something like that could happen. They pretty much looked at all these models of the economy, and they believed that, the economy was supposed to have a strong year this year, which is what a lot of people were expecting. People thought that, this would be a year of earnings growth and all these things. Nobody thought that a coronavirus could start spreading, or Vladimir Putin would start a oil price war and cause a lot of chaos in the energy markets. But it did happen. And guess what? We were always vulnerable. Even when it appeared like things were stable, even when, volatility was low, the stock market was rising, the economy was supposedly doing well, wages were rising, unemployment was low, even when it seemed like we were at our strongest, we were actually weak. We were actually weak because it is always in the nature of our reality that there exists the potential for bad things to happen. Bad things always will happen. And if you're not prepared for those bad things, you can't call yourself strong. You cannot call yourself a strong economy if some unexpected event occurs and your economy is immediately just collapsing, in all areas, and everyone's going out of business, everyone's out of a job. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, economic pain is inescapable in a situation like a pandemic. But the fact that, we're on the brink of the fastest pace of job destruction just reflects what I've been talking about for a long time, of how our entire system is poorly structured and how we were so weak in reality, even though, people were constantly throwing at you all these economic numbers that are supposed to tell you that we are in fact strong. But it's really all just an illusion. The truth is, we were never that strong. And right now we're just being exposed for it. So we need to start expecting and holding people accountable for the fact that, yes, it's bad that bad things happen, but you need to be expected to prepare for that. So I think that starts at an individual level, but that also goes to a larger level, to the level of the government or a corporation. So in that sense, that's kind of the problem with just saving large corporations. Because, when you save them, you enable them to continue their reckless behavior and their just kind of carefree approach to the world, when the world is in fact not a very carefree place. The world is very chaotic, and you need to always be prepared for that. So anyway, that's just what I want to talk about. As usual, well, starting from this point on, the episodes are going to be shorter. So yeah. Anyway, I'll see y'all next week.